Welcome to PR Future. This is Fred Cook, and this week we're going to share with you a panel discussion that we had at the KOS Symposium a few nights ago. The topic was Mind the Gap, which is the subject of our latest Global Communications Report, which was a survey of 1,000 PR people from all four generations working in PR right now, asking them about the major forces that are disrupting our industry, starting with AI, the hybrid work environment, the changing media landscape, and of course, polarization. Moderating the panel was Barby Siegel, the CEO of the Zeno Group, and on the panel was featured Kelly McGinnis, who's the Chief Communications Officer at Levi Strauss. Levi Strauss was the recipient of the Annenberg Purpose Award, the third year in a row that we've given it out, and Kelly was our keynote speaker. In addition to Kelly on the panel, we had Bill Amata, the founder and chairman and Chief Connectivity Officer of the IW Group, and Sonia Iliffe-Moon, the Chief Communications Officer at Yahoo. And finally, Kendall Eccles, a former student at USC, who is the former PR manager at Savage X Fenty by Rihanna. You can see all their bios in the show notes. We're delighted to make this conversation more widely available, and I think you'll enjoy it. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Barby.
Fred, thank you. What an honor it is to moderate this esteemed panel. Having spent two full days here on campus, I can say that I really think we are in great hands. The students here are, wow, incredible. And I think we've talked about the gaps in the research which Fred took us through. And the question is this really a generational divide, or are we better together? And I think we really are better together. So we're going to start with a quick lightning round here just to warm up. We all know that communications has changed in so many ways. Just tell us quickly, and you each come from a different point of view on different types of jobs. How do you spend your time today? Bill, quickly, we're just going to start with you.
I spend my time reading the news every morning.
Watching CNN?
Correct.
You spend your whole day reading the news?
I spend about 30 minutes in the morning watching all the news every single day, including CNN.
And then the rest of the day?
I spend talking to people.
Okay.
Talking to people like you and going to events and donating my time.
Okay, Kelly?
I always think about this at the end of the year because when I have my performance review, I always realize that the only thing that breaks through for my organization and my boss is what I did in terms of external earned media. But if I think about my day, usually I spend 75% of my time on internal comms. That's really changed a lot recently. And now the public affairs part of my portfolio takes up all the time. So it's interesting to look and see how the pie chart shifts and then what actually is visible to your peers versus what you actually are doing all day.
Donna?
Wow. So many similar things, lots of time on internal communications. Employees are a hugely important stakeholder for us. Like Bill, I also spend time reading the news, but also my news starts often on social. So I start there and then it's kind of a maze through the day. It's really hard to be completely informed because things are changing hourly. You have to read, you have to go validate. So a lot of time reading and staying informed, staying inspired by different trends. And then, staying in touch with the exec leadership team and the GMs, understanding what's happening with products, staying in touch with the team. And then, having a little bit of space and time to think and get creative.
Hi, everyone. The first part of my day, I'm a consumer. I am reading media, I'm scrolling, and I'm also getting a touch point of what's going on internally. So that can guide me throughout my second half of the day in which I'm a producer. That's a lot of my writing, reporting, lots of numbers, especially what Kelly was saying about external. What is the EMV? What are the impressions? So the first half of my day, for sure, consuming information, and then the second half of my day, producing information.
And I think today for all of us, our jobs are really about making an impact, whether that's in society or on the business and the bottom line. Okay, so let's talk about the gaps and the generations, 4 generations in the workplace. In your own organizations, do people really understand there are 4 generations, and are they coexisting and just operating in their own spaces, or do you feel that they are truly collaborating and helping and learning from each other? And Kelly, I'll quickly start with you.
I think both is the answer to that question. So I think, I was looking at that slide that Fred shared with was it 70 something percent of Gen Z wants their companies to weigh in. We feel that in our town halls every single time. So my CEO's name is Michelle. We have Ask Michelle Anything. People can ask anything and they stand up and they use it as a soapbox. And that's absolutely true. That said, to your question about coexisting, we all need to hear that, right? And it needs to be positive pressure on the system as well. So I think, I also work in design and in a fashion company, right? So that you could ride our elevator. It's a stylish elevator for sure, right? So I think there is a coexisting that happens and that we're learning. And, the designers talk about they learn from the streets, right? And so I think that's all part of the piece of the puzzle. And as a heritage brand, we have to reintroduce ourselves and reinvent ourselves generation after generation. So if it was anything less than that, it'd be a problem.
Bill, your perspective from running an agency, are the generations actively seeking ways to work together and learn from each other? And as Kelly said in her remarks, really listening to each other, because the future of our industry are the young people for sure. And we have a lot to learn from them. I learned so much today, but they have a lot to learn from us as well. And I like to talk about minding the gap and galvanizing the gap, actively having people work together. Is that happening in the agency, or how do you make that more prevalent?
Well, Fred said it actually perfectly. The Gen Z, the millennials, the Gen Xers, and boomers in the organization actually realize that they have a role to play. So the Gen Zers in particular definitely want a place where they feel welcome, and they also want a place where they can learn and develop, but they also want to learn from the other generations, particularly boomers and the Gen Xers, their purpose and how did they find that purpose. So in an agency environment, we are forced to work together because our clients are changing and evolving, and they also reflect the diversity that exists in our country. So we all have to work together, and we all make a concerted effort to do that.
Kendall, I want to go to you because I'm so happy to have you. You are you're on the cusp of Gen Z. Zillennial, right. So in your career, have you ever felt that because you were on the younger side that maybe your voice wasn't heard? I mean, back in the day, it was the years on your resume that got you to the table. And I think if we continue to think that way, we will lose. But have you ever felt that you were looked at differently because you were younger, but you knew inside you had an important point of view to share?
Absolutely.
And how have you broken through?
I have broken through. I've been in PR officially 8 years this spring. But for sure, when I was starting off super, super green, even within the third and fourth year, literally learning how to arrange my resume and how I even present myself. I stopped putting years on when it came to education.
I stopped putting years on too. Maybe for a different reason.
But for sure have had to navigate that and in a lot of ways prove myself, especially when it comes to coming not only with a perspective, but an informed, a research-based perspective, and showing that the strategy didn't just come out of a pie in the sky idea, but it was actually informed by the client's consumer's behavior or what's the upcoming trends. It's gotten a lot better, but even coming from a younger company where the primary demographic is millennials and Gen Z, that we still have some Gen X, there's even some moments where nobody's like listening to each other either, but having the patience to really discuss things. I think even coming from the millennial and working with older millennials, things that they did at the beginning of their careers are vastly different. I had a boss once, when she started physically cutting clippings. Now I'm an Excel grid. Put the link in the grid with the impressions. Exactly. So being able to meet each other in the middle, to work smarter and not harder, but also making sure that we're not hitting the goals.
And I think for the young people in the audience starting their careers, just reminding everybody that to give your point of view and not let anybody stop you because you don't know enough to have an opinion. I think that is, we're very conscious of that, and I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And I think I'm so grateful throughout my entire career, even with, the different generational bumps and moments, there's always been an openness to hear my point of view, and to implement whatever ideas there may be. To Barbie's point, always give your ideas, even if they're getting blank stares on the Zoom calls. Always.
And I think it's being in an organization that facilitates that, because not all of them do. Okay, I'm going to take a switch to a much more serious, complex topic, and I'm looking at you, Kelly. I mean, for all of us in the industry, you have been the guiding light of purpose and social responsibility and all of that. And Fred has talked about the polarization and the disheartening drop of people who, it's dropped from 89% in 2023 to 52% in 2025 about companies taking a stand. And I guess, and there's, a lot of talk about DE&I and how companies are talking about that. I guess from your point of view, what advice do you have for all of us across the generations, but I would say especially for those earlier in their careers who have not maybe been through as many storms in business as we have? How do we not be disheartened? Number one, I guess it's a two-parter. And what advice do you have for choosing the right organization, or if you see something and believe in something, having the strength to speak up and maybe be that agent of change?
I don't think anyone's going to have an answer to those questions.
You're the best person to give it a whirl.
But what I would say is, I think that data point that you quoted up front of going from 80 something to 55% just begs us to understand why. My speculation is it's fear and risk aversion, right? So I do think there are very real risks that we have to consider within the workplace that we didn't before. And the things that we see in the headlines just in the last couple of weeks, what's happening with law firms, what's happening, I mean, it's changed in terms of what the dynamics are. And we're going to have to keep understanding that. I think right now, the advice that we're following and that we're pushing ourselves really hard is to understand the issues. We are monitoring. My team is going to be smart. We're going to understand where this is evolving and what is going on, and we're not going to react. We're going to be thoughtful, and we're going to be ready when the time comes and when we pick our moments. And that's really the conversation that we're having internally. I think in terms of credibility within our organization, complicated, and we're just going to put our heads down, then as a function, we're going to lose our credibility as well. And I think for us, it really comes back to our values. So I bored you guys a lot talking about our values, but our values show up. And that question of what side of history is going to be the right side of history is a really clarifying question. And I think if you hold those true, there will be a moment, and we need to be ready.
You said in your comments that values have always been non-negotiable at Levi's. And I think for all of us and everybody at whatever stage you are in your career, your own values as well need to be non-negotiable. And I think we all have to be brave enough to say, I can accept this or I can't. Bill, in running an agency and dealing with lots of issues and DE&I mean, what experience are you having with your own staff about people maybe being disheartened? How are you keeping everybody with some sense of hope and optimism?
We follow exactly what Kelly says, is that you need to look inward first, and the employees actually tell us some of the things that they need and want, but we're also being very empathetic about those needs. But we also are encouraging the companies that we work with to stand their ground and to stand for something. And if you are going to stand for something, that's going to really mean something not only to your employees, but to the younger generations that are coming in. And you see that in the data, right? Is that young people want companies to not only embrace and align with their values, but to stand for something that's going to make a real impact. And so that's what we do at our company, is to make sure we listen to the employees, just as Kelly does, and allow them to guide us in taking that stance and providing that opportunity for them to do that.
And I think the bottom line is whether you're talking about a company or an employee or the individuals, it comes down to your values and what you personally believe in and where you want to move forward toward. Okay, switching gears again, lightening things up just a bit. Hybrid work, an issue that is still in everyone's mind. So here the gap was really interesting. For Gen Z, work from home is an expectation, with 40% of Gen Zers say they would accept less pay in exchange for greater flexibility. Talk a little bit about how you think about remote work and hybrid work. And I want to also talk a little bit about the value of being together with people, especially in the earlier part of your career.
Absolutely. For me, I think it comes down to autonomy and having a choice. So going back to the data, if a lot of younger generations, if there's no choice, if there isn't an option, that's a turnoff. Like, oh, I'm required and expected to be here 5 days of the week. And I think especially with the younger generations, and I can personally speak to this, I graduated, I had to finish my last semester of grad school here at USC remotely because the pandemic had started. And then after that, getting all of my jobs following that was all remote because of the pandemic, and learning how to recognize what works for me at home and what doesn't. And then that transition into at Savage Hybrid, 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. And especially being in an in-house position, that was necessary. That communication, Kelly talked about DNA. We have to talk. The social marketing, branding, supply chain, product. We have to talk. But again, there was still even a choice in autonomy and flexibility. Hey, I know it's a Wednesday, but I'm gonna stay remote because I know I need to knock out 3 press releases, and having that option. So navigating it, especially with older companies or even older seasoned leadership, I should say, it's like, no, no. This is what the norm is. This is what is expected. But I think a lot of the Gen Z generation and even millennial generation feel strongly about it because they had to learn very early, unfortunately, due to unprecedented times, of how to work in different environments, remote, against their choice because of what was going on in the world.
So now, what is the policy at Yahoo? How do you work, and what gaps do you see across the generations?
Yeah, at Yahoo, we don't actually have a one-size-fits-all approach. Every team has a little bit of a different way they are approaching, depending on their business needs. For communications, we have a flexible policy and approach, and frankly, it's allowed me to recruit phenomenal team members from Apple, from Amazon, from Meta, from Nike, and I think that flexibility has been a real attractive option in addition to working at the coolest company in the world, Yahoo. But on shameless plug. But I also think that we have really incredible tools now to stay connected, and in a way that democratizes connection and access. Like everyone knows how to use Slack, and we can connect in real time, regardless of what generation we represent. So I think it's been a real benefit to us. There's still incredible importance in coming together, building relationships, those hallway conversations. So we intentionally design times to meet up. Everyone's met each other. We go meet press regularly. So it's just by design.
Kelly, what advice do you have for people starting out in their careers about how to determine, are they going to take a role that's hybrid, a role that's remote, balancing being in the office, not? What advice do you have? What's your view?
I think Kendall told us the answer to this, and this is about having autonomy and the ability to make decisions. I'm connecting a couple of dots, so indulge me because it's not going to make all that much sense. But you raised some of the issues around DE&I, and we haven't actually talked about how much time all of us are spending on DE&I and how silly it is that what the pieces of the puzzle that we're talking about. It's not about semantics. It's about, do people feel like they have a sense of belonging in their organizations, and how do we facilitate that? And I think hybrid is a piece of that puzzle. And if you think about, so I would be Gen X, but I was there cutting out clips and highlighting and using the fax machine for sure. But if you even roll back to those days, we didn't spend 5 days in the office. We were at our clients. We were out in the road. We were with reporters. So there was no magical day when we were all chained to our desks. So to even think that that's the issue is not. It's a question of, do I feel respected? Am I able to do the best work of my career? And are there enough times that our team is getting together that we collaborate effectively? I think that's what people are asking of their leaders, and they bristle at this idea. I think all generations bristle at the idea that it's something about you're checking how much time I'm sitting in my chair.
I think you raised such a good point. It is also about trust.
Yes.
If you don't trust people to know that they have work to do, that they have obligations. So I think that's critical. I am a huge proponent of flexibility, of being able to build a career and have a life. But I also feel strongly, and no surprise to the Zeno people in the room, that being together is good for your soul. It's good for your mind. We're creative. So I don't think you can build and I know you're not saying this, I don't think you can build a career sitting behind a computer. I think there is so much joy to be derived from being together with people, but we all have dry cleaning to get, and we all want to get to our kids' games. And I know I love to make dinner at night, and technology allows us to do that. And my employer trusts that I'm paying attention when I need to pay attention. And I think we need to show our own people that we trust you, but give some guidance about what is good for them and good for us.
Agreed. I mean, the other thing I think about is I ask for a tremendous amount of discretionary effort for my team. These jobs are 24/7 jobs. We have conference calls on Sundays. We have work that has to be done when the news is breaking or when something is coming together. And that's another component of the trust. It's a reciprocal relationship and an acknowledgement of that.
And when you have to show up, when you're asked to show up, you show up.
Exactly.
Okay. AI, 2 favorite letters in the alphabet. Bill, you told us when we did our little prep session, you wanted to talk about this. So we're all talking about AI. I think Gen Z, the data shows, is, very comfortable with it. But misinformation is something that we all need to address. How should brands and agencies and companies, what should they be doing to combat misinformation?
They should continue to be talking to each other. The one thing I love about AI is that this is something that every generation needs to embrace. And I think in the PR industry, we are starting to embrace it and see the value that it brings. But we also need that human touch whenever we're working with AI. And this is where all the generations really need to lean in and be able to do the fact checking, be able to hold each other accountable. So that's how we do it.
Sona, would you like to weigh in on this?
Well, I think AI is probably the greatest tool that communicators have ever had in our careers, and will really truly allow us to democratize content creation and open up space and time to get creative, to collaborate with each other. I think it's super important that we as an industry take a very principled approach before we get too far.
Kendall, talking to our own Gen Zers, I was surprised when I asked them how they're viewing AI. It's a group of 12. It's our own advisory board of Gen Zers at Zeno. They said they felt tremendous guilt. They felt guilt because they feel that they're turning to AI for work that they should be doing themselves. And I said, please don't feel that. This is allowing you to get to other more interesting work, to more strategic work. But how do you react? I saw you go like this.
Well,
So
first of all, shout out to integrity, I agree, and I have felt that way before. I think it's important at the end of the day, the writing. And I do agree about embracing AI as a tool, especially if it can help with editing and catching different errors and whatnot. But to Bill's point, we always have to make sure there's a voice, a human touch to it.
God, of course.
So it makes me smile. That's why I react. It makes me smile to know that the younger generation that I'm representing has that level of integrity of knowing, hey, I'm using AI, but that tells me, okay, there's still a reverence for writing and having strong writing skills. And now it's about marrying those two things together to make work. I'm all about working smarter, not harder. I think it's different when AI is being used, especially as a publicist or somebody doing the messaging, where they're solely relying on the technology and none of their own efforts or none of their own ideas or none of the company's mission and values and own messaging points are being folded into, and it's just a sole reliance on it. But as far as using it as a tool to make the day easier, to make the press materials get completed, absolutely.
But that's the beauty of it, that we can all use AI and use it as a starter and then get to the fun part, which is being a critical thinker and saying, can I do this better? Can I change it around? It just sort of gets your brain going. So my advice to them was not to feel guilt, but to use it in the right way and to use it to advance your thinking and frankly, your careers. Because for some of us back in the day, we were cutting clips and doing things that were not exactly intellectually stimulating. Now I think there's an opportunity to get to that work much quicker and much earlier in your career.
I also think it can expand your thinking, right? So one of the things that we use is just to anticipate what would be the negative set interpretation of this. So things that we just might not have the perspective on, and testing things before we actually use them has been really effective for us. Yeah. Usually we remember to do that after we get ourselves in hot water, but sometimes we remember to do it beforehand.
Okay, I want to switch to another favorite topic of mine, but this was very, very important in the research, and that is the changing media landscape. And we're so happy that we have someone who is, one of the most iconic media platforms, and plug for Yahoo, celebrating its 30th anniversary. So Gen Z is not reading the Wall Street Journal, and Gen Z, for some of us, when we started our career, it was a story above the fold in the Wall Street Journal. That was they don't know what we're talking about, but that was you got a gold star for that. But then it kind of evaporated, which is today the stories last. So how do you think, at Yahoo, how do you think about the balance between emerging media, traditional media? What's sort of your point of view? And then I want to go to the other panelists on how you use both in your day, because I don't think it's one or the other, but a combination of both.
Yeah, and I'll take a bit of a step back because I think this is maybe the biggest paradigm shift that we've ever seen in media since the advent of the printing press, since the advent of broadcast media, the shift to digital. But I think what it comes down to is trust, and people trust based on different reasons. It's either authenticity or it's authority, and I think we're seeing that big difference across the generations. Some are choosing Taylor Swift for her authenticity and celebrity endorsement. Some are choosing authority and the depth that comes from the New York Times. By the way, I'm excited by both. I'm equally excited by both. I'm a millennial, just like Yahoo. I'm the eldest millennial. But at Yahoo, we're also leaning into these trends. Yahoo News is the #1 news site in the U.S., but we're interesting in that we're an aggregator. We're curating content from over 1,000 different publishers, and we're also using original reporting that's meant to provide context. And I think that helps, right? We're bringing kind of the fragmented pieces into one ecosystem. And we know that people are starting their journeys oftentimes on social. So our articles are also on social. I start on social, and then I go to Yahoo News and dig deeper.
Right. Kelly, Levi's runs across the generations. So how do you think about what we call earned media and sort of the balance? I don't think it's one or the other. I think we need it all. But how do you think about that at Levi's in terms of the day-to-day work?
Yeah, well, it struck me looking at the data. I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish first and foremost, right? So to reach our fans and on our marketing communications, that's going to be very heavy outside of earned media. Yes, that's a nice place to add, but that's not where we start. On the corporate piece, though, one of the things that I think is super interesting is that we have to convince those little tiny turquoise boxes that they're going to have to do things that they haven't done before, right? So you think about executive communications and sitting across from a C-level exec and saying, I'm going to have you talk to this fellow who writes a column on Substack.
Yes, yes.
And this is why that matters. And they start with, what the hell is Substack? And then they Google it. And then they say, I can't get in there, right? And so to say that those conversations are very shifting and very real. And I think that it's really easy for all of us to be like, well, I can do what I have always done. That'll be okay. But we know that's not what's right. And to really push ourselves for that innovation and to hear that from everyone around the table. So I know what I read in the morning, and I'm not always in the place that other people are. And really hearing from our team members and our agencies and everyone that's in the mix to say, we need to expand those lists and we need to expand who we engage with.
I think you make such a good point. There is a job of education, and certainly coming from the agency point of view, we see this in the C-suite about it's not just the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and AP. This other emerging media can be even more powerful. So there is a re-education that needs to be done. Bill, for our young people starting out, I mean, what should they be looking at every day? Is it enough just to look at their phone, or should they be diving into some of the more traditional media as well to be fully well-rounded? And perhaps it also changes by the sector that you're in. I mean, fashion is one thing, technology and health, which is health still leans traditional, is another.
I actually don't always agree with the data because I actually think now there's 4 generations living at home. And everyone's watching and consuming different media. So everyone is exposed to it. The parents are exposed to TikTok. I'm addicted to it in the morning, actually. And they're asking questions. And then the parents and the grandparents are asking questions of the young people. The young people are seeing CNN and Fox because their parents are watching it. So you're seeing all the generations being influenced by the media. But I would say to young people, the best form of media is experience something. So I think the best advice I would have to brands and the agencies is to let young people experience your brand, not just see it, not just hear it, but to taste it and to smell it. So that's a form of media that I think is going to be very important for them moving on, because if they are able to look at media and all the experiences 360, they're going to be better PR practitioners.
And, coming from that generation, I highly agree with you, Bill, because that was going to be a piece of advice that I would give for those who are coming up literally right behind me, of being well-breast in all different types of media. You can't just solely rely on social. You can't just solely rely on traditional, but being able to be well-rounded. And these are one of those generational threads that I hold on to even now, being the youngest one on the panel. I have to experience something. I have to engage with it on social, but also read it. Because when it's coming to strategy, especially managing up and advising C-suite members who, again, are like, we want the Vogue feature. I'm like, the product is not even ours. Like, we can't do that. But being able to have, the goal is to build brand awareness and have some kind of relationship with the stakeholders. How don't we explore different ways that we can connect with them so that there is that touch point that you spoke of? Absolutely.
As our resident Gen Zer-ish, how do you start your day? What do you read? What are your must-reads? Or watches, or whatever you're doing on your phone?
Nowadays, I actually am starting off with CNN.
Ah,
I am. Especially even coming from more of a lifestyle and fashion sector of the space. Everything that's happening on a government, on a social climate level, it impacts fashion. It impacts lifestyle. So typically I'm starting off with that. And then lo and behold, I'll jump to a Vogue, I'll jump to a Elle, and I'll be able to see a through line immediately. I remember we were trying to figure out how we launched some of our 360 marketing campaigns during the election. Regardless of voting choice or what you supported, there was impact on the campaign, and we had to navigate that. And if we weren't paying attention to what was going on and making sure that we were activating media literacy and getting a full understanding and not just opinions, that is what helped guide us to make sure that we were still authentically connecting with our stakeholders while also being sensitive to what was going on.
Fred, do you want to go to questions?
With the audience.
With the audience. Okay, audience.
Thank you. Very nice presentation. Thank you, everyone. Question going back to hybrid work environment, culture. Now, we talked about culture and the core values. So when you're only in an office 1 or 2 days, what is your opinion about building, retaining, enhancing your culture?
Lunch.
He's 100% right. It's always the free food. No.
Happy hour at 3:00.
We did a study on exactly that topic, and we presented it to IABC last year. We found that hybrid work does impact culture. At the same time, it improves morale, and that's the balancing act between those two things. And you have to decide which is the most important for your company. and also try to figure out how you can build culture when people aren't together all the time. And there are a lot of innovative ways to do that. But I think the idea that culture can only be built when people are sitting together is going to be a little out of date.
Fred, I think that's a really important point. I'm sorry, Zona. Oh, no. No, honestly, I think it's making us build muscles that we didn't have before as well. So we're a global company, but we really like to be plaza-centric is what we call our headquarters, right? And if we have an event, everyone will show up and they'll have a great time. That said, by having our all-hands meetings in a global way, virtual, and inviting everyone around the world, one of the pieces of feedback we get is don't be so headquarters-centric. Make sure that you're incorporating the folks who are online and the questions that are coming online. Don't ask questions about what's happening with the commuter shuttle. Ask questions about what's happening with the business around. And to me, that's a challenge for us to improve our culture to be more inclusive. And so we just have to learn how to do it differently.
And I think it's super important for employees to know when and where they can stay connected and feel informed. We do virtual town halls every single month, and the Slack channel for that is like one of the funnest places to be. There are so many emojis, a lot of connection, and so it does feel very connective.
And then for me, when I graduated from SC, I was with an agency remotely for 3 years, completely remote.
Wow.
Luckily, the founders were based in LA. However, they went above and beyond to make sure there was connectivity. So every quarter we had some kind of touch point, some kind of retreat. And even weekly they implemented virtual happy hours. We would play games. And some looking from the outside would be like, oh, that's a lot. But those efforts actually help create a culture to make sure that the morale was still healthy.
Hi, my name is Daniel, and thank you for sharing your insights tonight. I wanted to ask about the AI pillar here. Barby, you made the point that AI lets our teams get to the point where they can do their creative thinking. My concern is that they're not. My concern is that they're becoming really good prompt engineers, but not really good writers. How are you guys navigating that internally? Because as a senior person that's reviewing a lot of work, I'm seeing AI-driven content, but I could say it's not on point, sometimes missing a soul. There's a lot of different ways I can articulate that, but what it really boils down to is people aren't learning how to write. They're learning how to edit at best and just creative ways to repurpose content.
Wow. Who would like to go first? That was a lot. I mean, that kind of breaks my heart, to be honest, as someone who loves to write and loves words. I can't speak for other organizations here, but AI is a tool that gets us started. I think it is incumbent upon the leaders and the managers to have the eye and to understand that we cannot be producing soulless work. You know, if I prompt AI on something, so is the next agency and the next agency and the next agency. So, you can't all be delivering the same stuff. I think, like anything, it starts with the top about how to think about AI as a tool, as a start. But we expect, and one thing we didn't talk about, but expectations and explaining your expectations, especially to new people coming on. We talk about it a lot. We think that they know because we know, but they don't unless you say it. And our expectation is that you use AI to get the juices flowing, to get a first draft. But we expect you to take a critical eye. We expect you to edit it. We expect you to share it with colleagues and make sure it isn't soulless. So that I appreciate the question. It makes me sad. That's not the quality of work I know that we want to produce, nor do I think it's the quality of work that our clients expect. And we certainly will not allow that to be the case.
Writing was the number one thing, number one skill. Every generation thought that was the most important thing.
And obviously, it's super important not to skip levels of the video game and ensure that, people joining the industry are gaining that foundational expertise. But there are so many other ways to leverage AI today, including, looking through your transcriptions and getting some action items coming out of things. I put this report into Notebook LM and I listened to a podcast on it. It was really interesting.
How'd we sound?
We sounded great. So there are many different ways that our team is kind of leveraging it, but it's super important that everything has human review. And as a leader of the team, I have that sixth sense to identify when something's off and make sure that's not the direction we're going down.
Not meant to be like a cheat. It's meant to be an additive partner and tool.
Yeah, when I connect the dots from what we were talking about culture and then bridge into here, one of the things I know that's core in our team is peer review. Like folks know that someone else on the team is going to review, and there's a sniff test for sure that goes with people who generate content and don't do the hard work to make sure that it lives up to quality. And it's a little bit of a diss if you hear like, looks like you probably generated that, didn't really work on it. And so I don't think that's something that is going to be tolerated in a team that holds itself to high quality.
Right.
And for the students sitting in the audience, this again, the Gen Z rep, shameless plug for USC and the Center of PR, and Fred and Jen Floto and Ron really lean into these classes, because I can say hands down, as someone who at this point in her career has hired on and has been on the other side of being interviewed as well. The strategy, the education, the writing skills that I acquired at SC definitely makes me stand up from other candidates. And not only that, but I can confidently say using AI as a tool and not as a crutch.
Hi, you all talked a lot about companies really trying to stand for things, whether that's their values, their issues, something on an issue. And a lot of that's driven by employees, really urging and pressing you all to do that. But we're in such unprecedented times. I'm wondering, when you stand for something, particularly some of the issues that would normally be very acceptable are now being targeted. You could raise your head up and get targeted for being attacked and potentially punished at a very high level. Is that changing the conversation now with leadership, or how is it changing the conversation with leadership and the board saying, maybe we can't raise our head up and stand for that, or we can't be very visible standing for something? Is it changing because of this very recent kind of situation?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I've got to believe that. And I think you were kind of indicating that we're going to have to think about it, pick and choose our time and whatever, because I think it's become a very dangerous thing to stand for things.
Yes. And to be inconsistent is dangerous as well. So there is many examples of companies that didn't stand up for their values being held to account on that as ones who are
right
changing because
that used to be
pressure.
the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just complicated.
It is very, and I'm curious how you're
an inordinate
navigating
amount
that.
of time talking about it and figuring out sort of how do you navigate. And really at this point, I think it's a matter of monitoring, picking your moments, and really, for now, trying not to be reactive because it changes in 12 hours too, right? And so
We're PR people. We should figure this out. For instance, look at Costco. Costco was smart. Costco used their voice and met with the board in advance, talked to shareholders, talked to employees, and they demonstrated why DE&I is in their DNA. So I think in PR, this is what we should be doing, is we should be thinking ahead about what the headwinds are going to be. And of course, this is a time where we don't know, but we have some skills that we could do this. Let's talk to the employees. Let's talk to our shareholders. Let's talk to our board. Let's take a stand and get people behind it. I think
and use the data, benchmark. There are an equal number of examples of companies on the positive side of standing up, using their proxy, maybe executing a little bit differently, but there's an equal number of examples on both sides. It's just one gets more headlines than the other.
And she said it best. Actions speak louder than words. We have an ability to change minds. But if we do this in advance, people do support what they help create. And so I don't like to give companies an excuse to say we're going to change things. If they were smart, they would have thought about these headwinds earlier, and they would be very proactive about talking to their employees like you do, talking to your customers like you do, and also talking to your board and shareholders and letting them in on why this matters. And then you take a position, because the risk of waffling is worse.
I'm Ziana. I'll be graduating in May, and I'll be entering the workforce soon. And I think what I would really want to learn more about is, as I enter the workforce and I'll be working with people of different generations, what does positive and productive collaborations between generations look like? And for Gen Z, what working relationships and dynamics should we be striving for in the workplace?
I think one super important thing is to make sure we're listening and seeking to understand each other instead of assuming. I think that is probably the most risky thing. So just taking that time to have conversations, seek different perspectives, understand different people's experiences to kind of grow your own point of view and your own experiences and for them to gain from you.
I would say respecting each other's views is super important, and understanding that everybody brings a different life experience to a particular challenge, and having an open mind to do things a little bit differently, whether it's the Gen X and boomers or the Gen Z. I am a firm believer that we are better together, and we have so much to teach each other and support each other and lift each other up. And in our business today, new creative solutions is truly the name of the game. And I think those are going to come from all of us working together and bringing new expected and unexpected ideas and ways of communicating and telling our stories. So it's all of our moment, not just one generation's. It's all of our moment together.
And I would say, as somebody who's entering the workforce, this is some pivotal advice someone gave to me when I was, don't forget to network laterally, because even laterally, there are different generations. So keep that in mind. I know sometimes we can be like, I got to meet the CEO and I got to meet the CMO, which is great. Love you, Barbie.
I'm not that important.
But even still, the people that you are networking laterally are the ones who are going to be coming up with you. I literally have gotten opportunities or have extended opportunities because of an old USC colleague or somebody I used to supervise at my former agency. So don't forget to network laterally.
That will be your network for life.
Yeah.
25 years
Seriously.
from now, you'll say, we did this now, and then you'll all be helping each other. That's a great point.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. This is a question for anyone who would like to answer. Do you think there's a negative connotation with remote work as employees? Like, for example, do you think that there's potential to promote toxic behavior like toxic positivity, or like not wanting to take a sick day because like there's no commute? And like, how do you kind of like help combat that with the team?
Communications is a time-consuming profession. So if you choose to come into communications, you have to be realistic about the news cycles that we operate in, and that we will work in, our work will ebb and flow. And there will be times when it's all in and it's whatever it takes to get it done. This is a job that requires hustle, first and foremost. I think the second question you asked was, is that a enabler of something that proliferates negative behaviors? And I think that's a piece of there are many things that do that, and we all have to be advocates. What I've noticed in the workplace is a tremendous amount of increase of focus on well-being and making sure that people are finding the time. One of the things that we brought out of the pandemic was the last Friday of the month is basically a well-being day for the company. And there have been lots of folks who've raised their hand to say, the same executives who are saying, why don't we get everybody back 5 days a week, are raising their hand and saying, why are we still doing, we call them corporate Fridays. It's a tremendous benefit that people feel really valued, they feel trusted, and it's a competitive differentiator for us. So there's a give and take on both of those, but I do feel like that mental health is such a more open conversation in the workplace that's really the positive benefit that I think is the counterbalance to what you're talking about.
If I can just build on that, I think that, yes, this is a tough, every business is tough. This is a tough business. We're at the mercy of the news cycle, and the crisis is always on a Friday night or Thanksgiving. But we owe it to ourselves and our colleagues, our clients, the companies we work for to take that time. Nobody can do it 365 days of the week, 24/7. So the opportunity to do something else, to find some joy, one of my favorite words, it will make you better, it will make your colleagues better, it will make the work better. I know Kelly did not mean that she expects people to work 24/7. And I agree that there are ebbs and flows, but as important as being available for the next issue and next big news cycle, so too is to say, I need a break and I need to refuel so I can be better for tomorrow or the next day.
Hi, I'm Melinda with PRSA LA. There have been so many challenges that we're facing as an industry that you've talked about today. And thank you for reminding us that there are generational gaps as well. Like the data is very concerning. So that said, it's clear that as communicators, we know how to question what's happening. We know how to find out why it's happening, but also to act together. And so my question is to each one of you, if you together formed the best of the best agencies and just one great agency, what would be the one thing that individually each one of you would work to advocate to change in our industry?
Let's huddle and figure out the answer.
Honestly, I think just comms having a seat at the table from the onset is super important. Many problems could be avoided if it starts there. So I would say that.
I would say bring Gen Z and millennials to the leadership table early.
Yeah.
And not have this hierarchical system within our agencies where the executives all talk and then but bring Gen Z and millennials and bring them to the table early and not hide problems or challenges from them, but let them be part of the solution.
I think we're doing this, but I think it's continuing to lean in on the soft skills. I think that we have to be the people who say the thing, whatever it is, and are willing to put it on the table and push hard to make sure that we understand what the real is, and then we figure out what we're going to communicate. But I think continuing to value those soft skills that people need to bring to be able to build trust, to be able to build their influence, and be able to make an impact in an organization is incredibly important.
And I think for me, it's sort of kind of piggybacking off of what Bill said, but the advocacy of it all and empowering the younger generations, but all of us to be open-minded and have those conversations. Literally, even your point earlier about comms having an earlier seat at the table, a lot of that times that happens because there's miseducation or misinformation about what PR comms role is in general. So having the camaraderie and the advocacy even internally and being able to equip people to show how to be a good advocate, not only for an issue, but for a stakeholder, but for a person, that's what I would want us to bring to the table as an agency.
Well, I think we're building a fantastic agency here.
Ready, Barbara? Barbie, let's go for it.
I would just add two things, building. One is that we all come to the table first as smart business people, not as the channel that we operate in. I'm a media person, I'm a digital person. First, it's about solving a business challenge and understanding what that is. And the second thing I would say that the ultimate measure is impact. Impact on business, impact on society, impact on whatever is important to that situation.
Lasting impact.
Hi, thank you. I'm a USC alumni. Thank you for being here. We touched on soft skills. And so my question to you all is, what have you seen either lacking as far as soft skills in PR, or what has driven somebody to succeed in PR as far as soft skills?
Oh, I can start. And the younger generation might look at me crazy, but getting on the phone. A lot of younger generations like to get on the phone, and
Oh, boomers say this all the time, by the way.
But literally, maybe I'm secretly a boomer. I don't know, but I will say again, I'm just somebody who truly believes in taking a piece of everything to make a bigger picture. And one piece of advice that I've just witnessed with older generations is getting on the phone. That is a soft skill I think is dying out a little bit with the younger generations. I literally had a save the day moment just because I got on the phone with Telemundo. Like, who would have thought? But had I got caught up in like, ooh, I'm just gonna email, I've had to push back on that. So I would say getting on the phone is one of those soft skills that I think is lacking and we could see more of.
We've obviously spoken a good amount about the political divide and corporate responsibility with how we present our stands on that. I think as organizations, we often get tunnel vision on, and probably rightfully so, on how it's perceived externally when we take a stand. But how do you evaluate taking a stand without alienating the people internally inside the company as well, and focusing on the internal communications aspect of making sure that, especially while we're having a conversation about generational divides, right, where people have a lot of different points of view, without making anybody inside the company feel alienated at their own place of work?
I'll tell you a little story. So when we decided to weigh in on gun violence prevention, one of the executives who managed our business in Texas called me up and he said, I hear you, and I want you to know if you're telling me that I'm not going to be able to protect us, then that's on you. Now, lots of pieces of information came out in that phone call. Number one, apparently he was carrying to the office, which we didn't know. But number two, that he felt that sense of responsibility. What made me really happy was he called, right? And there was room for a dialogue. And not only did we have that conversation, we had that conversation in an open town hall. And the challenge was that our leaders felt that people should be able to come into our stores and feel safe, and our employees should be able to feel safe in their workplace, and that we wanted to be a part of that solution. And while there's room for people to have differences of opinion, we want them to talk about it. We want them to know that we'll hold space for it, and we'll still move forward on where we're going to land. And I think that has been a really consistent piece of the puzzle for us, is when we do take what could be perceived as controversial stands, we make extra space internally for people to share their points of view and for that to be okay, and really invite those conversations as opposed to wait for them.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you want to know more, you can download the whole Global Communications Report called Mind the Gap at our website at the Center for Public Relations at Annenberg, or you can find the entire conversation for the evening, including my presentation, on YouTube by searching 2025 Kenneth Aller Smith Symposium. A big thanks to everyone who participated in making this event a huge success, and all the people on our panel. Until next time, I'm Fred Cook, and this has been PR Future.